Today, we're talking to Andrew Edwards, author of Army of Liars, about the problems of Section 230 and how we might be able to fix them. You're listening to Joel Beasley, Modern CTO.
No one actually understands these issues. I shouldn't say no one, but people who you'd expect to understand them don't.
Well, that's why I was so interested in talking with you, Andrew, is because if you go around, I talk to a lot of technology leaders, right? If you go around, the general regurgitation that you hear is, oh yeah, Section 230 is this thing. And then they say something about utilities and a law. And then it's just kind of it. A lot of people don't dig deeper than that surface. And I saw that you wrote an entire book about it called Army of Liars. Yeah. So what is Section 230?
So Section 230 is a United States law that essentially what it does is it has two important parts. The first part is one that I don't disagree with. It essentially says, it kind of reiterates a First Amendment right. And I'm a little surprised that they felt they had to reiterate this, but it says that if a platform claims immunity under Section 230, they can't be forced to publish something that they don't want to publish, which really is just like any publisher. If you send a letter to the op-ed division of the New York Times, or you send a short story to a publisher and they say no thank you, that's their right. And Section 230 extends that right to any platform that wants to claim other protections under Section 230. However, the problem is the incompatibility of the two parts of the law that are really problematic. The other part of the law is this, and this is the one I have the problem with. They are shielded from any and all liability, or I guess you'd say liability, for any sort of damages that result from the use or promotion of their product in the public sphere, so that anything that they choose to publish, and I think we can say choose to publish because of the other part of Section 230. If something's there, you can rest assured that they decided they would be okay with publishing that. And so you'd have to wonder, why are they, unlike any other publisher in the United States, and frankly any other business, completely above the law in terms of any sort of responsibility for the harms that may come from what they publish? And by harms, I mean things like doxing, threats of violence, terrorist recruitment videos, invitations to self-harm, and essentially all kinds of calls to violence. And I think that they are in that way unique in sort of publishing, if you will, because if you think about any other publisher where they would literally publish calls to violence and terrorist recruitment videos, and then there were harms to people because of the person who was recruited via those terrorist recruitment videos, I believe you'd be pretty certain that traditional publisher would have a lawsuit on their hands from a damaged party. And there's a particular case in point that I talk about. It's called Gonzalez versus Google, which fits that paradigm exactly. I could go into that if you want.
Yeah, please. Yeah. What happened with Gonzalez versus Google?
Yeah. So Gonzalez versus Google illustrates the point that I'm making. Google, of course, owns YouTube, and YouTube features videos of all different kinds. And the terrorist organization known as ISIS has been in the business of producing terrorist recruitment videos for quite a number of years now. And so these are videos meant to radicalize young people who are into jihad. and to invite them to become terrorists, suicide bombers, and in general to how to murder people. And YouTube allows these things on their site, and in fact, once they're on there, the algorithms take over and they start promoting these things to people who seem to be interested in this topic, so that when a particular terrorist or would-be terrorist expresses an interest in these things by, clicking on a couple of them, well, then YouTube's mechanisms themselves will say, hey, you want more of these? Would you like some more terrorist recruitment videos and how to murder people videos? And this would just go on. And what happened in the case of Gonzalez versus Google is that one of the people, and so Gonzalez versus Google, I should go to the root of it. It's based on what happened at the Paris nightclub attacks back, I think it is 2015, where Islamic jihadists attacked a nightclub in Paris and murdered 100 people or more. People who were just hanging out and dancing at a nightclub. One of them happened to be an American citizen, last name Gonzalez, and the father felt that these terrorist recruitment videos invited at least one person to learn how to murder his daughter, and that they went ahead and they did that, having been radicalized and recruited via the exposure through YouTube, which is owned by Google, to these videos. And not just the passive experience of them, but the promotion of these videos used because of Google's algorithms and how they deliver content. And so he sued Google, saying, in essence, you have proximate cause liability for the death of my daughter, which is similar to, the tort laws in which, say, an airplane crash where there was no pilot error, but where it turns out that there was faulty design and faulty manufacturing that the company knew about and didn't do anything about, which resulted in a malfunction, which resulted in a crash, which killed people. Now, we know that we've already seen these kind of tort cases go ahead and result in huge settlements for the victims, because that's what tort law is about. It's like if you put out a product that is so grievously flawed and you knew about it, and then people were killed, you have something to answer for. And so that was his premise. So he went and sued YouTube/Google, and he won in lower courts, but Google kept appealing it, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court finally said, no, Gonzalez, you have no case. The reason you have no case is because they are protected under Section 230. And that was the end of it. So I think that illustrates the problem pretty well as far as I'm concerned. You have a multi-billion-dollar company which essentially accepted terrorist recruitment videos, promoted terrorist recruitment videos. The terrorist recruitment videos had their intended effect. Google knew these were there. They knew what they could do, and it happened. And yet, because of Section 230, they are totally protected. And so it creates an atmosphere where you have these media companies, self-styled social media companies, setting themselves up as vectors for disinformation and calls to violence, and yet with zero responsibility for any of the harms that come from it.
That's pretty crazy.
I think so. I think it's ruinous, and I think that we have an enormous problem on our hands because too few people actually understand the dynamics of this and really like how social media even exists. Like these companies, I call them publishers. I know they want to say they're social media platforms, but my position is that this is essentially sleight of hand, a very self-serving sleight of hand in which because they simply go ahead without license whatsoever, call themselves platforms, technology platforms, that they thereby unilaterally and apropos of no license whatsoever to just be protected under Section 230 simply because they say they are. And the courts absolutely buy into it. So could the New York Times claim to be a technology company protected under Section 230? Well, at the outest, with the farthest reach of how this plays out logically, the answer probably is yes, except that they wouldn't get away with it because the courts wouldn't support it. But heck, the New York Times uses technology. Why is the technology they use any so much different than the technology that Facebook uses? There really is no meaningful difference in terms of the public effect of this. It's merely that the whole society, frankly, including the courts and legislators and most people who commentate on it, have just simply been bamboozled by these companies, thinking that they are something special and deserve to be above the law, and they're operating above the law with no liability, and as a sort of byproduct of their hugely profitable publishing platforms, they are in the business of destroying civil society. It's much as if we allowed, say, oil companies, let's say, to just smoke us out, just burn up as much oil as possible in the shortest amount of time without any regulations whatsoever, and we'd all be choking to death, and they would be above the reach of the law because they'd be protected by a Section 230 like exemption where it wouldn't matter how much they were destroying society or destroying the earth. They would be simply saying, oh, it would be kind of hard for us to do anything about it, and therefore we're not. And the law would be, yeah, and they have no responsibility whatsoever, so go away and choke to death. And that's essentially what is going on with social media today.
What's the answer? Is it to replace 230 altogether with better laws?
Well, in my personal opinion, it would not be a bad idea at all to simply sunset Section 230. And there actually is a bill in Congress. It's not going anywhere, but it was sponsored by Congressman Pallone from New Jersey. And there's a Republican congressperson in the state of Washington who co-sponsoring it it's a very simple bill, sunset Section 230. Now, I'm hugely in favor of that because all that would really do would be to level the playing field, that all publishers now are the same. And by the way, I haven't heard any non-social media publishers complaining that somehow they cannot operate, under the law. Only social media wants you to think that they would not be able to do what they do if they were liable for the effects of their product, which strikes me as disingenuous and kind of highly objectionable, not to say ruinous for civil society.
Well, I don't know. So help me understand, because I'm exploring all sides of this here. So the New York Times, obviously they're employing people to make content. The only content that goes on their platform is content that their employees were paid to make. So I can see how that's different versus I'm a platform and I can let people do it. I'll let people post what they want. Then you've got the issues, like that's one thing. Then you've got the issue of I'm a platform, I'm going to let people post what they want. We're going to censor some stuff, but it's going to be at our discretion, right? So they're choosing what to censor. And I'm like super pro free speech, right? So like I am like unadulterated 100% free speech. Yes, I'm aware of the arguments on both sides and I get that. But I believe that the only way to counter bad speech is by better speech, right? So I can see how the social media company could be in in a weird position, right? They're on one side of things. If they're going to accept this liability, then they have to have complete editorial control, right? Because that's what they have to do. Or they can give the rights to the people in which anything can go out. And I think they do need protection because people can put out some weird stuff, right? But if we just look at it as like black and white like that, I don't think that solves the problem. And I think we can get more creative with our laws in the country to make it so that we can all decide as a people, maybe like vote on it, what content is, like, how do we actually classify different types of content? Like, can we all vote and agree that like child pornography should not be distributed? I think we can. Terrorist recruitment videos. And so I don't see another way to do it that isn't going culturally issue by issue and like having some sort of system in place to handle that. What do you think?
Well, so it's an interesting question. I do understand the sentiment that the other way to go would be to literally say, okay, well, we don't like Section 230 because it gives you the right to not publish stuff people send you. Maybe you shouldn't have that right. If you're above the law, then what are you worried about? Just let everybody post whatever. And, that you can say, okay, then leave it to the markets. And, are people going to spend time on a platform that's pretty much just full of, really objectionable stuff because they're not making any editorial decisions? And I know you used the word censorship, which is something I'd like to get back to. But so that's one way to do it. But here's my take on it. If you simply get rid of Section 230, what you do is you're not making any new laws or determinations about what they can do. They could continue to operate exactly as they do today. However, because they could get sued for real damages in a court of law, they would probably be a lot more circumspect about some of the very, very extreme stuff, which is really kind of where I feel, the pressure needs to be put. And so, courts don't take cases that are frivolous. So if you have liability, there'd have to be actual damages for somebody to actually get at them. So just disagreeing or feeling like, oh, that was offensive, or I didn't want to hear that, or, any number of other complaints, that wouldn't rise to the level of actionable, because courts aren't going to be taking a case where it's like, oh, you were very much offended by that, were you? Well, we'll have to have a trial about that. No, it would be more like the Gonzalez versus Google case, where it's like, wow, you helped. Your platform was materially involved in recruiting a terrorist who ended up killing somebody. Mm-hmm. That kind of case the courts would take, and that would probably give these platforms a very major reason to think very hard about the kind of stuff that they permitted on their platforms.
Yeah, and as they become more vocal about what they permit and what they don't permit, that allows opportunities in the free market for different places to pop up. Like I see this massive shift to X. Like, I love it that he removed a lot of the nonsense that was on the platform as far as, censorship. I know you want to get into that a little bit, so maybe now is a good time.
Yeah. So yeah, the word censorship is something I feel like is misunderstood. I feel very strongly that editorial choice by any private or publicly owned enterprise cannot be censorship and is not censorship. It's editorial choice. So, for instance, going back through all of the history of publishing, if somebody, wants to publish a story or take a certain point of view, and the platform that they're looking to present it through, be that, radio, television, or print, or electronic, if a decision is made by that entity that they don't want that's always been considered editorial choice, not censorship. And the reason I say that is because censorship really is a thing, but it's not something that can be done by a private entity. Only the government can actually censor you. And here's my rationale for that. Let's say that you have a story that you want to, you have a diatribe that you want to get out there, and you got the whole thing prepared, and you've got, several different posts that you're going to be putting up on social media. But it turns out that they just tell you that that's too extreme and they don't want it on there. Well, you could complain that that's censorship. And I have a personal anecdote where I could tell you that kind of a thing happened to me. But you can always buy a megaphone in this country. Let's say they tell you that you can't be on the platform. Well, guess what? Like I said, you can buy a megaphone and stand in the town square and shout about this all you want until somebody makes a noise complaint. Or you can print up 10,000 flyers and put them around. Or you can do calisthenics in the park while somebody has a placard with your comments on it. There are many, many ways that you can get the word out. Just because someone chooses not to be part of it is to claim that that's censorship, I think, is disingenuous. Censorship is like what happens in Russia when the opposition leader ends up getting poisoned because they spoke out. Or in Iran, where, the girl who didn't wear her hijab properly, who was caught singing, gets her face beat in. That's censorship. Not mere non-amplification. That's not censorship, in my opinion, because you have options. You could do something else.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I mean, those other things are like way worse. Beating someone's face in and murdering a political opponent. I wouldn't call that censorship. I'd call that violence. Censorship.
It is also censorship, though, because it stops them from speaking.
Right. So I would say, let's take it literally. If that's the definition, stops you from speaking, then yeah, if the platform non-monetize, or what did you call it?
No, I call it non-amplification.
Non-amplification, then that would be a synonym of censorship, right? Like it is.
If indeed
not
you
allowing your voice to be
you
heard.
had no alternative, if you had no alternative and you couldn't speak, yeah, but you can't. You definitely can, just because. Facebook doesn't want you on there. Again, buy a megaphone.
Yeah, but I don't follow that argument because what you're saying is like, because there's an alternative. That's not in the definition. The definition is simply not allowing in that instance for it to occur, right?
I think we have a disagreement on the meaning, on the definition of censorship. Editorial choice, is editorial choice censorship? If we're going to say that, then I guess editors and all publishers have been engaging in censorship since time immemorial, because they choose to publish or not publish. I mean, I've had,
right.
I would send out short stories to magazines and they would say no. Well, that's not censorship. It's like, they're not interested. Sorry.
Yeah, but that's
away.
not what's happening today, because like what you're talking about, and help me understand this because I could be wrong. You're talking about like if Section 230 was thrown out and then they did have, I'm talking about today, like right now, today. So I'm just not following you there with the editorial choice. Obviously, if it's my platform and I'm putting content out and people are suggesting content to me and I'm saying yes and no, the whole brand is the fact that it's me doing the filtering, right? It's me aggregating all of this, and so I have some liability because I'm picking and choosing, versus the platforms where they have the problem. I think that we're starting to see in the conversation is that the platforms have the immunity, but they still do the choosing and picking through their algorithms.
Yeah.
They're like, they have like both, and it's weird because we don't know how to deal with it.
That is a key issue. Like I'm thinking, at worst, it should be either or. Being able to do both is kind of like it's the publishing equivalent of quantum entanglement. and be, or the uncertainty principle, Schrodinger's cat, kind of like you can't be blind and not blind at the same time. That's
But
kind
that's
of
what
the
they're
way
doing right now.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that is the underlying problem, is that these laws were designed before this new thing emerged.
Well, for sure. Yes.
Yeah. And
Section
now we
230
need,
was designed to protect these little innocent, if I can use that word, pre-web bulletin boards from like CompuServe and, real text only, there was no video, there was no promotion of anything, there was no filtering of anything. It was literally like the want ads. I'm selling a bicycle, call me at this number, right? So it was no different than say a bulletin board at the coffee shop, right? And so of course it made sense to protect these little bulletin boards in case somebody put pornography up on the platform, or kind of like you'd say, oh, if somebody put pornography up on the bulletin board at the coffee shop, of course you'd expect them to take it down, but you're not going to like shut down the coffee shop because of that. And of
Right.
course, you'd want these little bulletin boards to be protected. And that made a lot of sense. But they were not, the problem is they weren't in the business of monetizing the content in the way that it's being monetized now. And they certainly weren't in the position of choosing and promoting what was put on there. It was all kind of just flat. It's like, here's a bunch of classified ads, essentially, and that's it. Whereas you have, the algorithms, the targeting and the content promotion algorithms is what really sets the platforms apart. And so, yeah, there's a reason why they're as powerful as they are. It's because they're operating in a uniquely empowered place that gives them both the right to censor, as you would use the word, and protection for any decisions that they make. That there is no other company, I can promise you this, there is no other company in the United States that enjoys both of those rights.
Right. Well, you've got, no, I'm not going to go off of that tangent, but yes, I get what you're saying. And yeah, it's hard. So, I mean, I'll throw out an answer there. And I think the answer is we need better legislation around these multi-sided platforms. We need to,
I think we can agree on that. Totally agree. I mean, a simple solution would be get rid of Section 230 and let the courts figure it out. And courts don't take nonsense cases, so you would not find frivolity in this. But other than that, if you don't do that, then you've got to sort of start to parse it out and come up with more carefully rendered lawmaking, and I'm all for that. However, I think that one of the problems I'm seeing is that legislators, I don't know if you'll agree with me here, but legislators don't seem to have much of a clue as to what to say, think, or do about any of this stuff. And that I think is also deeply concerning.
I did a whole episode on the average age of a congressperson,
Yeah.
like over time.
Yeah.
And it just, we're in a weird spot right now where the people making 80+% of the people making the laws aren't even living the type of lives that, I am living with 3 young kids and a digital economy.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. In fact, I forget what case it was. It wasn't Gonzalez versus Google. It was a different case, but it concerned immunity, and it concerned the digital realms, and it went to the Supreme Court. And I remember it was Elena Kagan, one of the liberals on the court, who said, none of us here are really experts in technology. So you're looking at people who really don't understand the depths of what we're talking about here. And I felt like saying, well, then you need to recuse yourself. You're telling us that you don't know what you're talking about, and yet you're going to make decisions about this for all of us? You got to be kidding me. I'll do it for you.
It's like seeing Zuckerberg on C-SPAN and like trying to dumb it down for a toddler. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it was just hard for me to watch.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It is. It wasn't that long ago where there was a senator who said the internet is a series of tubes, and then
Mhm.
there was he's gone now, but it was Orrin Hatch who asked Zuckerberg, "You don't sell anything on your site, so how do you make money?" And he said, "Senator, we sell ads." End of
Mhm.
story. Like, you didn't. How do you not know that?
Yeah, well, these people they're older and they're very wealthy, and they don't need to. It's
I get, and
anti-competitive.
also
Yeah,
it's a totally new world. I mean, they're
it
just,
is.
they just don't have any grasp of what the actual dynamics of the technology is, or what the social impact of any of it is, and that's really
Well,
disturbing.
there's really only one answer, and it's lower the median age of the people making the laws. Because I
You,
have kids that are 7, 5, and 2, and I look at the stuff that they're doing, and my whole entire life is like building software systems, making this tech leadership podcast, talking to these greatest minds in the world. Like, I'm in it, eat it, sleep, breathe it 24/7, right? And I see some of the stuff that they're doing. I'm just like, nah, I'm not, I don't have the time to go learn all of that. I'm busy like making money and providing for my family.
yeah,
And
yeah,
And so the answer would be they're going to have the same problem when I get older, right? Like, I'm going to get older and I'm going to have all the knowledge of this technology that I
yep,
grew up with and I worked with. And then we're going to be debating these weird new things like, oh, this person's quantum leaping, outside of their normal hours.
yeah,
It's like, I don't know what they're doing.
yeah. They
But,
moved to the future.
yeah, it's like we need people who know what they're doing to be making the rules, and then they can be guided with the wisdom of the people who've come before them, right?
Yep.
Like the elders, I'm not saying that we don't have a place in society for elders. We absolutely do. Critical, essential to our survival and our progression. What I'm saying is that the elders are like making all the rules right now, and they need to be advising the generation who has to live with the rules, and let
Yeah.
the generation who has to live with the rules make the rules.
Absolutely. I think they don't know how the underlying principles of democracy and the nation itself intersect with this technology. I think they
Yeah.
just have such a deficit of understanding of how, say, an algorithm works, or what
Mhm.
targeting is, or what promotion is, or essentially what digital analytics is and how it fuels decision making. They have no concept of that. And so with that kind of deficit, it's really kind of no wonder that really they're doing nothing about it. Absolutely nothing.
So I think you've won me over on strategy. At first, I was like pretty hard-lined on we just need better laws, and I think you agreed with that too. But the
Yeah.
method of going about them, there's really two possibilities. One, as you stated, is remove Section 230, let the courts kind of filter, and then through the pressure of that, new laws will be created
Either
and we'll just be forced as a people to deal with this head on, because everybody will have incentive. The consumers and the users will have incentive, and the platforms will have an incentive to reach some sort of agreement on how we handle this.
I think
so we can
that's
all
right.
play by rules.
Yeah.
And the second one is to try to do that before. And knowing human nature, that's not going to work very well. You just have to, if you just remove the law, I like your strategy, remove the law, let the pressure hit, let all the
Yeah.
courts filter stuff out, and then create this incentive for people to figure it out. I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, it's kind of breathtakingly simple, because if you get rid of it, the legislation equals zero. You don't have to do anything else. We already have, freedom of speech. We already have all publishers up until now. Again, I'm going to reiterate, I don't hear them complaining about how they can't operate. And there are publishers who publish all kinds of wacky stuff, but there's always limits to that, where it's going, maybe it causes someone to be murdered. Like, we don't want that. you know,
Right.
we can handle all this other stuff, but we don't want that. We don't want, we don't want Instagram being used to invite children to self-harm, or to claim, convince them that their family's going to get killed if they don't, take indecent pictures of themselves. These things are not to be tolerated, in my opinion. And, those are the things that I think the courts probably would weigh in on. And all the other stuff, like, I don't like what you said, they'd be like, no, that's not, we're not going to legislate, we're not going to talk about that. That's your problem.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this. You can buy the book on Amazon, correct?
Yes. Army of Liars.
Army of Liars.
Right
Buy it on
there.
Amazon.
Army of
Beautiful.
Liars. It's on Amazon. Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you found this episode useful, please share it with a friend or a colleague who you think would get value from it. And if you have topics that you would like to hear discussed on the podcast, either add me on LinkedIn or send me an email, joel@moderncto.io. Every time I get an email or LinkedIn message, it absolutely makes my day and inspires me to keep going.